Hello and welcome to Newsnight. I am Ajayi-Kadir. Thanks for joining us today. My guest on the edition says there must be no disjointing links between policies put out by the President Bola Tinubu administration, especially as concerns the economy. My guest also thinks that new laws that bring new taxes or increases in the rate of old ones on an already challenged sector will be counterproductive. Newsnight talks to the Director General of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, Mr. Ajayi-Kadir. Mr. Ajayi-Kadir, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Nigeria is said to have a revenue problem. That's what we have. And so when people talk about debt, when they talk about all kinds of other issues, particularly economic, it all comes back to the fact that we're not making enough money. Now, you are Director General of the manufacturers, and that is one sector that is supposed to be helping us make money. But there seems to be some disconnect between the government's desire to make money and the manufacturers' desire to also make money and provide goods and services. What is the situation as you understand it with this new Bola Ahmed Tinubu-led administration so far?
I think that right from the beginning, when he made his inaugural speech, it was clear to Mr. President that Nigeria's economy is in a dire state and that a lot needed to be done to improve productivity and then for government also to generate the needed funds to run government and to, sort of replace the economy, having witnessed such a worrisome level of development, especially in recent times. So I think the picture we have is that of a president that is aware of the parlous state of the economy and is therefore interested in making quick decisions that should stop the bleeding that we are having, and then to try to encourage productivity, which for me remains the only way that you can have an economy that is functional, that will be able to generate the funds that government needs, and at the same time allow business people like manufacturers to do business, the one that will attract other investors, both foreign and local, and the ones that will inspire confidence that the system has integrity, that the system is reliable, is predictable, and that we have a sustainable pattern of growth. Because if you operate in an uncertain environment, it is not possible for you from beginning to make up your mind which kind of business to do, what government policies to rely upon, and whether it will be sustainable. And if you have a chance of realizing the profits that you are looking forward to, and whether the government can be trusted. So I think generally speaking, it's the interest of government to generate revenue and the interest of the investor, like a manufacturer, to make profit. They are not mutually exclusive. It is just that the right policies have to be put in place, the right consultations have to be done, and then we all work together to run a functional economic environment that will be good for government, that will be good for the investor, and for the overall well-being of the citizens of Nigeria.
Let's take the discussion on this line a bit further and look at it, because government's main method of generating revenue is taxes. And the manufacturers have complained down the years of a multiplicity of taxes, both at federal, state, and local levels, and that this burden, the tax burden, is significant. Now, the new administration talks about harmonization, but we have heard this before. What kind of harmonization would create a situation where government makes revenue, but at the same time, it does not crush the entrepreneurial spirit, particularly of small and medium enterprises?
Well, thank you very much, because this is a very important question. And it's a question that is being asked across Africa. At the Afreximbank AGM that just concluded in Ghana, it was indicated as one area that governments have to manage in a prudent manner. So for us, the kind of harmonization that we are looking for is the one that allows each tier of government, local government, state government, and federal government, to operate in such a manner that their taxes does not impose additional burden or become an impediment for productivity and for the progress that we look forward to making in the economy. We have had situations in the past where regulatory agencies of government that are supposed to facilitate business have outrightly turned into revenue generation outfit of government, which is inimical to even the plans that was government had in mind when they were created. So we are looking forward to an arrangement that allows an investor to predict from the word go that these are my tax obligations, this is the time due for payment, and that over a reasonable period of time, these are my expectations, these are my deliverables, these are my obligations to government. So what we are looking forward to is one that does not in any way introduce arbitrariness. It does not allow discretion. For instance, there is one that has been done by the Joint Tax Board, which has tended to harmonize haulage and other fees that are collected by different types of local government. Before the harmonization, it was chaos. You move from Lagos to Oyo and the rest, and then you pay each step of the way. They have managed to agree with some arrangement that has enabled a harmonization. But then what we have seen immediately is that there is a massive escalation of the rates. That is not what harmonization means. And I think that is what we look forward to this administration enforcing. Harmonization does not mean that you now add together all the taxes that are being collected by different tiers at different locations, and then you put it on a businessman. So what we are looking forward to is the one that is based on a consultation that we have had between government and the private sector or the operators, such that we will be able to have taxes that will enable government to take what is due to it and not continue to impose additional taxes on surviving businesses. What we look forward to is a situation where operating businesses are allowed to function in an environment that they will be able to predict their taxes, they will be able to have it delivered to government in a transparent, accountable manner, and in such a way that over a period of time, they will be able to see what the taxes are being used for. Don't forget that there's a lot of trust deficit on the part of government. So when we are asking for a harmonization, we are looking forward to an arrangement that the private sector will keep its own part, the government will do its own part, and then we have an encouragement of even those that are outside the tax net to come in. Essentially, we believe that even though government wants a lot of revenue, and we know the reasons why, and fully support government, but they need to be able to demonstrate capacity to expand the tax net. This is the only way you can do, but not to add to the taxes that you have and to overburden those that are tax compliant.
There is the new finance bill. I say new because it only came to light when this new administration came in. But apparently it had been signed under the last administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. And under that law now, as it is, there seem to be, at least for those who have seen it, there seem to be a lot more to agonize about. There have been increase in excise duties, just to mention one. But there are other provisions of it that do not seem to have made the organized private sector, particularly manufacturers, very happy. Why is this so, and what are you hoping the new administration will do about this?
Yes, thank you, and I'll be very direct in my response. I think it's quite unconscionable for the last administration to impose an escalation of excise. especially in the area of food and beverage. We had a 3-year roadmap that was agreed at in the year 2022. It was to last 2022, 2023, and 2024. But barely 12 months into the tenure of the excise escalation, it was increased from 50% by 50% to 100%. And this has thrown the food and beverage sector, which is the highest contributor to manufacturing GDP, into disarray. It has threatened to completely disrupt the project, the projection of all the industry players. And so what we want the administration to do is to simply and effectively issue an executive order to suspend, to reject or to remove the escalation, and to ensure that there is an assessment of the impact of this roadmap in the first year. We actually tried to have a conversation with the past administration on why it should be discountenanced. We received promises that it will be done, but ultimately it was not done. So I think in the issue of excise, particularly as it affects alcoholic beverages, wines, and tobacco, it should be reversed. There are other ones like you have mentioned. We have the green tax, for instance, that has been imposed on single-use plastics without any definition or any guideline as to what constitutes single-use. Now, this is confusing. But at the same time, we have customs going to manufacturing industries and asking them to register when it is not clear whether those industries are producing single-use plastic. I think it's not possible for you to go into a match without rules. So you don't know when you are offside, you don't know when you are fouled against the rules, and you don't even know where the goalposts are. So we are saying that this should be suspended, and even the implementation time was fixed earlier than is anticipated by the rules that governments have made. We are supposed to have a lifeline of 3-month period for it to be implemented, but government is asking that by June 1st, it should be implemented when the Gazette came out only in May. So I think these are existing challenges that the current government, the government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, do not have to worry about its implication. They should just simply put it on hold by an executive order and allow the due process that is prescribed by law and consultations with the private sector operators to take place. I mean, these are very simple ones. But going forward, I think government should be able to rein in on regulatory agencies so that they focus on trade facilitation, which is why they're employed. Government needs revenue, but they need to collect revenue from businesses that are existing. You cannot collect revenue from the dead. Manufacturing is certainly in recession. We have been battered by quite a number of challenges that this incoming administration has already demonstrated capacity to resolve. So I think government should just continue on its track, but ensure that the backlog of challenges that they have are immediately removed. Because to my mind, what is better is for you to stop the bleeding and then manage the situation.
The policy, one of the policies that seems to have received mixed reactions, and I will explain why I said mixed reactions, it would have been all positive, except for the fact that when it was decided that there would be harmonization, government allowed all the windows for the foreign exchange rate to dissolve into one, and you find out now that what used to be known as the official window through which manufacturers and other such people were supposed to source for funds has now almost moved to the level of what we refer to as the black market. But there are two issues here. First is that at the same time that that was happening, the central bank reinforced the information that those who were banned under the last administration, the industries that produced particular things that were banned, under the will not have access to foreign exchange to import those items, that ban is still subsisting. And then there's the question of availability of the foreign exchange itself. So is this a question of, you give us with one hand and you take with the other? How are manufacturers reacting to this?
Yeah, so I think that even when the CBN made that policy of products that are not eligible for Forex, it was taken not in good faith, and it was done without consultation, and with due respect, with a huge dose of ignorance. Because those items that were listed, they were initially 41. International trade is conducted in terms of products, is conducted by HS codes. The HS codes that are listed under these 41 items are above 600 in number. So what they did inadvertently, of course, and that was because they didn't consult, was to have put a hold on the profitability of those companies that are involved in the production of those items that are on that 600 plus items. So in the first instance, it ought not to have been done. And Manufacturers Association of Nigeria actually consulted with government and promising, and we actually gave them a list of additional ones that they could put on it that would go well with items that are not eligible for Forex. But I mean, that is an issue that is for another day. But in the true sense of the word, if you retain those items that are not valid for Forex, we are actually eating away from those ones and ensuring that since we now have a fairly stable, predictable exchange rate, it will no longer essentially matter where you are sourcing your funds from. Hopefully, that is going to be the issue, because while the leverage that the CBN had at that time was that they wouldn't allow you to access Forex at the official rate. But now the rates are almost converging, though not totally, but they are more, the gap is much narrower then than now that we have. So we don't anticipate that is going to be so much of an issue. And of course, the CBN does not have powers to ban any product. What they can do is to ensure that, probably using the official window, manufacturers will not have access to those products. And this is why we are talking of harmony between fiscal policy and monetary policy. You cannot have the fiscal policy promoting a certain kind of product in national interest and for economic development, and you have the monetary aspect being a law on its own and countering the advantages, because it is the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning that has the overall picture of how our economy is going to be managed through the use of fiscal policies. So they ought to have synergized with the central bank. Now to the second part of your question. We are looking forward to a situation where the unification of the Forex will allow manufacturers to have some measure of predictability. It has led to an increase in the cost of imports. But the impact, which we are already assessing, and there's a study going on among our members to understand the implications, and we are going to make representation to government to see how, even with the acceptable unification that we have, how the challenges that have emerged will be resolved. But in the real sense of the word, when we had these dual rates that had so much spread, manufacturers were getting less than 10% of what they require. Most manufacturers were getting less than 10% of what they require. So it didn't really matter what we are facing now. But of course, the few that are getting it will be heavily impacted. And I think it is only by continuous engagement with government that we'll be able to arrive at an arrangement that will prioritize allocation to the productive sector. At the end of the day, it was because of the near arrogance of the previous administration in CBN that did not allow the right communication and the right consultations and the right engagement to take place. We were all on the same page with the CBN on promoting local sourcing of raw materials. So if that policy on items that are not eligible for Forex had been done in consultation with us, government will have been able to rake in more money. Government will have been able to advance local sourcing of raw materials. government will have been enlightened about what sector they can incentivize, such that we will have a more export-oriented manufacturing sector, and also the ones that can deliver in terms of competition with imported goods at the domestic market.
In terms of availability, is it more available now? Now that, as you just said, there's a narrowing of the band between what used to be known as the official window and the black market. But has that impacted the availability? Do we now have, do your members have access to Forex to fund, among other things, letters of credit, payment for port charges, things like that, as goods move from one place to the other? I know it's still early days because this happened only a couple of days ago, but I mean, over the time, they will tell you that how the day will be seen in the morning. Has there been any impact?
Yes, I think there are indications that now we are going to be able to source more, because the usual excuse that the commercial bank will normally give, that they do not have Forex in stock, and so you just have to go to the parallel market or the black market, as it's called, is more or less disappearing. The gap has narrowed, and so you could have it. But of course, you always know that the challenge is at what cost. And then the implications of sourcing your Forex at this very high rate. Of course, you know that manufacturers are not philanthropists. Some of these costs may have to be passed on to the consumer, whilst mitigating it will require how much we are also able to mitigate other costs. And that's why there is need for caution in terms of what the threshold for reforms that can be taken at the same time, so that we do not unnecessarily and inadvertently disrupt the progress that is in sight that we can have.
There is, this has been a long time in coming, and for manufacturers, it has been a fairly difficult period. I mean, if we go back to the recession that happened almost immediately after this administration took over, when you had the drop in oil prices and revenue was hit, and then you had COVID-19, which also disrupted a whole lot of things. And then earlier this year, and I'm just picking just 3 examples of major disruptions here, you had the currency swap issue that took place ahead of the election, starting from December last year, and which went on almost until the aftermath of the general election. It has been tough for manufacturers. At some point, capacity utilization, depending on who you ask, dropped to as much as 10%. And many factories were closed. Many people were thrown out of work because they couldn't source for inputs, and where they could source, the prices were too high. There wasn't purchasing power. There was a lot of inventory. So I want to ask that today, as manufacturers, is it getting better? Are manufacturers seeing light at the end of the tunnel? Are they seeing hope ahead that, you know, things will make a major turnaround? Because it has been a fairly difficult period.
Thank you. I'm very happy with the way you have encapsulated the challenges that we face. I was almost thinking that you should be our chief advocate. All that you have listed have grossly limited the capacity of the manufacturing sector, particularly in the last 10 years. And so when we had Mr. President from day one voicing what we have always advocated for, we were hopeful and we were expectant. So what I would say is that there are still early days, which you have mentioned, for us to be able to assess the impact on the sector. The only thing it has done is that it has given us some measure of assurance that things are going to be done differently, that the challenges that we have mentioned and the president has duly recognized and even has started to take steps that will ameliorate those ones, give us high hopes. And because he has indicated that there will be a synergy between fiscal and monetary policies, and that he has said that it will be necessary to work on our fiscal and monetary policies in such a way that they promote productivity. We are hopeful. We are yet to see the impact. There are difficult choices that we have to make. We have to look at our processes. We have to look at our supply chain. We have to look at our cost structures. We need to be able to anticipate what will emerge from the follow-up regulations and initiatives that will support the president's pronouncement. But like we say, there is a lot of trust deficit on the part of government. Just as we are excited, so to say, about what the president is saying, we are hearing that there will be a 40% increase in electricity tariff. How do you deal with that? The cost
No,
of
that's a statement of fact. That's a statement of fact, Mr. Ajayi-Kadir. There is going to be a 40% increase in tax. The rates are out, and people are already debating it, and some are already receiving notices.
Honestly, this is unconscionable. You see, there are certain things we need to do, and timing is of essence. Now, why the only argument I've seen is about being cost reflective, charging cost reflective tariff. But which cost are you reflecting? Is it the cost of incompetence of the operators? Is it the cost of the debtors that they are incapable of collecting electricity tariff from? Who is going to pay the manufacturer for the damage done by fluctuating and inadequate power supply? What is the cost? Are we thinking of paying for only the cost of services delivered? I mean, so there has to be a conversation. And I think within the rules, there are rooms for consultations. I have not been consulted. My members have not been consulted. You just hear from the blues that in the 6 months of the year, you are going to escalate cost of electricity. Now, in manufacturing, the percentage of the cost of electricity, depending on how power intensive your company is somewhere between 28 to 40%. If you just suddenly hear that there's going to be an escalation and you are a manufacturer, what do you expect? What are you expecting that the manufacturer will feel? I mean, you see, we have to run an economy that is conscious of the delivery of its productive sector. And all over the world, people are managing the economy in such a coordinated manner. You can't give with one hand and take from the right hand and take from the left hand. So I think there has to be a measure of coordination. So far, the new administration appears to be going on the right trajectory. I think we need to be mindful of the small spoilers that are likely to aggravate the challenges that the administration is trying to resolve. And don't forget that at the end of it all, it is the well-being of the people that is being decimated. If you give me high cost as a manufacturer, I'm going to pass it on to the final consumer. And all those people that are involved in the value chain, I'm also going to right size because I cannot pay beyond what I produce. So I think there has to be a deeper reflection. And thank God we have a team that are advising the government. I think they need to take note of the feelers that they are getting from the operators in the economy. We cannot continue to run an economy where different government agencies operate in silos. Everything has to be coordinated and synchronized in such a way that you will inspire confidence in the operators that are on ground and those that are intending to come into the market.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to also ask you, because we're on the subject. All this is happening at the same time that the new administration has signed the new electricity bill into law. President Tinubu signed that into law, which allows for the issue of power generation to move from the exclusive list and move to the concurrent list, where states and others can also make arrangements for power supply. I raised that because you mentioned just now that between 28 and 40% of the costs for manufacturers, depending on what they are producing, would be power supply. Is this a good thing? Do you think that allowing others to do it, apart from the federal government, may bring down the cost or may make it more available or more consistent?
In the medium to long term, yes. I mean, we have commended government for doing that. We have only cautioned that there should be a lot of monitoring so that we don't start on the wrong foot. But that is a positive development. It is actually going to allow players to share power. It will open the room for competitiveness. It will increase the probability of having investors, both local and foreign, to go into it. Even state government, captive power, all sorts, excellent possibilities. And I believe that investors will be on the lookout on how they can come into the fray. But the only issues we are talking about is the now. What is relevant for the existing manufacturers? And we should not go into the same perception that the consumers of electricity are on the receiving end and they do not have a say. For instance, more than 50% of those who enjoy electricity in Nigeria are not metered. So you are not even able to control your cost. I mean, if the cost at which you are supplying electricity is going up, I can decide to rationalize my operations. I can decide to run 2 shifts rather than run 3 shifts. I can decide to switch off some equipment at certain times of the day. But if I'm not metered, it wouldn't amount to anything. It will only escalate the unfair tariffs that have continued to be served. So I think there are a lot of things that should have been put together. And I mean, what I heard is that the customers of that enjoy electricity in Nigeria are just about 11 point something million. I mean, and we have a population of 200 million people in Nigeria. So I think that there has to be a lot that is done, even under the current dispensation, for us to take into consideration the situation of those who enjoy electricity supply. I do not want to mention the fact that most manufacturers pay for the power that they do not enjoy. So for you to now put additional costs on such people is unfair. There are also many of us that run production processes that will not allow you to self-generate power. I do not also want, you know, the price of diesel, and you know that it is escalating. We are even told now that the VAT will be applied on diesel. So whichever way you look at it, this very important component of our cost structure is skyrocketing. You cannot reflect productivity like that. Nobody does that.
The other side of this, of course, is that, and you mentioned it just in passing now, as you just spoke just now when you talked about diesel. Diesel has been deregulated for quite a while, and we all know that in the aftermath of what is happening in Ukraine, the prices have gone up because that has introduced a high level of uncertainty. But then something else that has happened in the last couple of weeks is this deregulation of petrol. Now, most industries, particularly the small ones, rely on petrol generators. It's the medium and maybe large enterprises that use diesel because their own generators are bigger. But your barbing salon, your hair salon, and those other smaller manufacturers, and even some level of those who produce goods use petrol generators. And that is linked to the fact that they cannot guarantee constant, regular public power supply. So what you are saying so far has a link to that, because if power is consistent, then, you know, the use or the consumption of petrol will go down, isn't it? And now that petrol has been regulated, the price has gone up, and that is having impact on manufacturing. Have your members come back to you on that one since it started?
Yes, excellent analysis. They have. They have. And that's why I was saying that there has to be a lot of synergy. There has to be a holistic picture. Maybe because the reform that is being made is coming piecemeal. There is no nexus that connects them. And I think government needs to be very, very careful about it so that they don't inadvertently create a system that will spin out of control. And then we may start to have some discontent from the sectors that have so far given this new administration the right support. You see, it is not easy for you to cause such a price escalation in PMS and have everywhere quiet. I think what the people are saying to this government is that we are giving you a benefit of a doubt. As a matter of fact, we advocated that Nigerians should give this government a benefit of a doubt. Government should not shrink this confidence. There is need to show the citizens that government is coordinated and moving in the right direction. Now, apart from the fact that small-scale industries use PMS, the price has gone up. Many people use petrol to power their generators at home. Many people use petrol to power their generators at home. So and we are saying that government should actually improve the supply of electricity so that we will reduce the use of petrol at home and the rest. But this now is being sabotaged by the increase in electricity tariff. There has to be a breather for those who enjoy government utilities. Being conscious of it, being deliberate about it, being intentional about it, will be the ultimate decider of whether government will continue to earn the trust of the public or they will not.
I've been told in the past that at the rate that interests is charged on commercial loans that people source from Nigerian banks and the banking industry to set up and run and expand businesses, whether they be small, medium, or other enterprises, is at such a rate that only traders, those who do 90-day trading, you collect the money, go abroad, import, sell, and then return the money to the bank, all within a 90-day period, can afford to take those loans at those rates. But we have also heard under the new administration that they intend to bring those rates down to the level where they are viable for businesses to be able to take them, use them, run and return them. How is that going to work in your view, especially because those who have had access to this kind of government largesse in the past, some of them have not utilized the funds very well at that level?
But we have always indicated that if you give a manufacturer any credit facility, any loan, and you charge him more than a single digit, you have really not helped him. And even if you have helped him to overcome his financial needs, his credit needs, you have not helped the final consumer, because he's not going to be able to produce and sell at a price that will allow him to have a high turnover. So the effective lending rate for the in manufacturing is actually about 26%. And there is no manufacturing that you can do that will allow you to operate optimally, be able to make profit, and that the people, which should be our ultimate concern, will be better served and your products will be competitive. The access to credit has remained one of the minuses that we have had in terms of our competitiveness index. It has continued to make us not to be competitive, even when we compete against imported products in our own market, not to talk of the market penetration that we should have outside of the country, even within the West Africa, and beyond the continent. So for us, the promise of government, and again, which was said within the first 1 month of this administration, that we are going to be able to have a lessening of the burden of credit on manufacturers, is music to us. It is left now to be seen how this is going to be achieved. We have BOI that has done excellently well. And when we were in Accra, during the Afrexim back in GM and the various quite innovative suggestions that are being made, the MD of BOI did indicate that we have 13 trillion naira sitting in pension funds in Nigeria, idle, not utilized, and not helping the economy. If you put such monies, for instance, in the hands of BOI, it will be able to expand the credit facility to manufacturers using a different window from the commercial banks. Commercial banks will never want to lend to you long, and manufacturing has a long gestation period. So, but if you put it in the hands of a professionally run, that have a long history of repayment, and that have developed competence over a long period of time on how to manage manufacturing loan advancement, will be helpful to the economy. So we need to fund these special windows in such a way that they are able to support productivity, because at the end of the day, government is going to realize more revenue. Government will not be burdened with the attraction to escalating taxes and levies and fees on all fronts. The regulatory agencies will be able to focus on regulating and promoting and facilitating trade and manufacturing, and not grabbing at any opportunity to generate revenue. So these are windows that we believe the current administration is thinking about. Otherwise, we are going to have empty promises that didn't deliver. And people will start to imagine that we have had this before, we have had these assurances before, but what has always been the bane is putting it on ground. Let it land on the system so that we will be able to see immediate reaction from the part of the private sector.
My very next question has to do with something that for many people, they might consider it existential. And it has to do with the decision. This new administration has not yet, at least openly, given an indication of which direction it wants to go. There are those who have said that, look, if you want your manufacturing sector to grow, if you want it to develop and you want them to eventually produce goods that will be able to compete with others outside, you have to cocoon them for a particular period. You prevent outsiders from competing against them or from bringing in goods into their own home economy for a particular time. And then after that, you can do what you want to do. So sometimes that means border closures, bans on import of products and so on to encourage local production. But Nigeria has just signed on to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is almost the exact opposite of what I have just described. And there is also the fear that being the biggest market on the continent, all the other countries want to come here. They want to bring their goods here, which may necessarily mean that the local manufacturers here, apart from all the challenges they are dealing with, will be swamped by these external products. Now, as someone who can advise government, especially since they have not indicated yet which way they want to go, which way should they go? Should they protect local industry almost exclusively for a while before allowing foreign contests, or do they go the after way, which is free market, free entry, free exit?
Yes, you know, since you specifically mentioned the AFCFTA, when Nigeria was going to sign, MAN in particular advised government to do a study to be able to assess the possible impact that AFCFTA is going to have on the economy, and particularly the productive sector. What we meant by that was that we needed to understand what AFCFTA proposes and what the Nigerian economy is able to absorb. Trade has gone over the years, and a lot of stakeholders have come to a realization that it's not sustainable for you to continue to protect your economy from outside, from participation of outsiders. What is needed is for you to bring up internal mechanisms that will develop your own manufacturing sector in such a way that they will be able to withstand importation, which essentially that is what it is. If you fear that there's going to be an influx of manufactured products from third countries and even from the continent of Africa, what you need to do is to take measures that will allow your own manufacturing sector to be competitive. And for us as policy advocates, what we always look forward to is unfair competition. We are not against competition, but it's unfair competition. And unfair competition in such a way that your cost structures does not allow you to compete, not to even to compete domestically, not to even talk of exporting. And like you said, we have signed up to not only AFCFTA, we have the ETLS within the ECOWAS sub-region. We also have agreements with countries outside of Africa. But what I think we can do, and which is very important, is for us to re-examine our internal processes. It is for us to ensure that our regulatory agencies and government ministry departments and agencies that are responsible for promoting domestic manufacturing, in the case of the manufacturing sector, do what they can and what they must do to bring not only ease of doing business, but the costs of doing business in such a way that we are competitive. When the government took the right policy about fruit juices, for instance, we are confident now to say, allow imports. We have developed local capacity to compete. And we are there. There are so many other areas that government can intentionally promote. But when you have a situation where the domestic environment is so cost intensive, it is so difficult for an average manufacturer to even break even over a period. The manufacturing landscape is going to be a walkover, because what those people with whom we have signed AFCFTA with, for instance, in Benin, if you establish a factory in Benin with a lower cost of doing business, with much easier ways of doing business, you are just going to see lorry loads of those equipment driving past Badagry, entering Akpongbo in Lagos, and outselling the products that you have, because 90% of the tariff lines will be liberalized to zero. So you can no longer even use fiscal policy measures to protect the domestic industry. At the end of the day, it may not be fashionable for you to use tariff as a basis of protecting your local industries. Of course, all over the world, it is always used. But what is best advised is for government to realize that it can only be a short-term measure, and that what is sustainable is for government to take deliberate policies that will promote domestic manufacturing, even in such a way that you'll be able to export. Because if you can't compete with products from third countries, how will you be able to penetrate their markets? There was a time I mentioned that if you export from Nigeria and you take to Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, the man on the street is not going to buy from you because you are his brother from Nigeria. He would rather buy from Paris if the cost in the market is lower. So nothing will absorb the government from doing the heavy lifting of ensuring an environment that is conducive for manufacturing. There's no running away from it. And that's why when we see policies are conflicting and making it impossible for us to operate effectively, we get worried. We continue to complain, because if there is no way you will have a viral manufacturing sector in Nigeria if the government does not do what it ought to do. And look all over Africa. Everybody is reporting positive growth in manufacturing, and capacity utilization has not gone beyond 50% over a period of time. So it means for 50% of what you have ascertained that you are able to do, you are not able to do it. Manufacturing contribution to GDP has remained far less than 10%. You cannot have an environment that will allow the manufacturing sector to deliver on jobs, government revenues, advancement of technology, and competitiveness if you remain like that.
That's a great deal of food for thought at that point. But one will only wish that those, of course, who are coming up with these various policies that you talked about and the linkages between them, most importantly, take note of the points that you have made on behalf of the manufacturers in Nigeria. Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kadir, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you on the program today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That's our program today. We'd, of course, like to hear from you on the conversation. Our social media handles are right there on your screen. You can also listen to this and previous episodes of the program via our podcast and YouTube pages. Please visit our website, channelstv.com, to get started. I am Ladi Akiriduluale. Goodbye.